Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Jae Yoon, and before we get into today's video, I want you to do something for me. Think about what you had for dinner last night, or what you grabbed from the fridge this morning. There is a very good chance it was something you cooked the day before, pulled out, and reheated without thinking twice about it. And I understand that completely. Life is busy. Meal prepping and reheating leftovers is not laziness, it is efficiency. But here's what I need to share with you today, because this is the kind of information that almost never leaves the research literature and makes it into everyday conversation. Some of the most common foods that people reheat on a daily basis undergo chemical transformations at the molecular level that have been directly linked to cancer risk, neurological damage, and serious long-term harm to your digestive and cardiovascular systems. And what makes this particularly important for this channel is this. Food scientists and public health researchers in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan identified these risks decades before Western guidelines began to take them seriously. The East Asian approach to food safety around reheating is fundamentally more conservative than what most Western physicians discuss in a standard appointment. And today, I am going to show you exactly why. I am going to walk you through 4 specific foods that you should never reheat. Not because of a social media claim or an internet rumor, but because of what the actual science tells us happens inside these foods when they are exposed to heat a second time. Some of what I am about to share will genuinely surprise you. Stay with me all the way to the 4th one, because that is the one most people get completely wrong, and it may be the most consequential of all. Let's get into it. Food number 1, rice. I know exactly what you are thinking. Rice? People reheat rice every single day, and you are right, they do. But here's what most people have never been told about why reheating rice can be genuinely dangerous, and why Japanese food safety guidelines have treated this issue with a level of seriousness that Western guidelines are only beginning to catch up to. When rice is cooked and then left to cool, it creates the ideal environment for a bacterium called Bacillus cereus to form heat-resistant spores. And here's the critical detail that most people miss entirely. When you reheat that leftover rice, whether in a microwave or a pan, the heat kills the active bacteria, but it does not destroy the toxins that the bacteria have already produced. Those toxins survive reheating completely intact. When you consume them, they cause gastrointestinal illness, and with repeated exposure over time, they create a chronic burden on your digestive system and immune response that accumulates quietly over months and years. But there is a second layer to this that goes beyond the bacterial risk. When rice is cooled and then reheated, the starches undergo a process called retrogradation. When those restructured starches are exposed to uneven heat, which is exactly what a microwave produces, pockets of harmful byproducts can accumulate in specific areas of the food that are difficult to identify or avoid. Japanese food safety guidelines have specifically addressed the reheating of cooked rice for decades. The recommendation is not complicated, but it is precise. If leftover rice is going to be consumed, it should be stored immediately after cooking at the correct temperature, consumed within a tightly controlled window, and never reheated more than once. In Japan, rice is frequently eaten cold or at room temperature precisely because of this. In the West, the habit of pulling rice from the fridge and microwaving it repeatedly is treated as completely routine. The science says otherwise. Food number 2, cooked chicken. This one goes deeper than most people expect, and I want to be very clear about the mechanism because it is important. Yes, there is a bacterial component. Chicken is a high-risk protein when it comes to contamination, and improperly stored chicken reheated insufficiently is a straightforward food safety risk. But that is the part most people already know about. What most people do not know, and what the research makes very clear, is what happens to the protein structure of chicken when it is subjected to high heat a second time. When protein-rich foods like cooked chicken are reheated, particularly at the high temperatures produced by a microwave, the protein bonds that form during the initial cooking process break down further through a process called protein denaturation. And as those proteins reorganize under repeated heat stress, they produce compounds called heterocyclic amines and nitroso compounds. The World Health Organization has identified these compounds as carcinogenic. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified them in Group 1, meaning there is sufficient evidence to establish that they cause cancer in humans. Here is what makes this particularly relevant for how most people actually eat. If you are meal prepping, cooking a batch of chicken on Sunday, and reheating it for lunch on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, each reheating cycle is generating additional exposure to these compounds. It is not one acute event, it is cumulative. And cumulative carcinogenic exposure is precisely the kind of risk that does not announce itself until it has been building for years. South Korean nutritional research has been documenting the risks of repeatedly reheated meat proteins since the 1990s. The practical guidance from East Asian food medicine is consistent. Eat cooked chicken on the day it is prepared, or incorporate leftover chicken cold in salads, wraps, or cold preparations, rather than putting it through a second cycle of heat. The nutritional value is preserved. The compound formation is avoided. If you are finding this useful so far, take a moment right now and leave a comment telling me which country you are watching from. I read every single one. And hit the like button. It is the single most effective way to help this information reach someone who needs it. Food number 3, spinach and leafy greens. This is the one that genuinely surprises most people the first time they hear it, because spinach is one of the most nutritionally dense foods available. Raw or freshly cooked spinach is packed with iron, folate, antioxidants, and vitamins that your body genuinely needs. I am not questioning that. What I am telling you is that what happens when you cook spinach and then reheat it is an entirely different story at the chemical level. Spinach is naturally very high in nitrates. In their natural form, nitrates are not inherently harmful. Your body uses some of them for beneficial physiological functions. But here is where the problem begins. When spinach is cooked, bacteria on the leaves begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. When that cooked spinach is then reheated, especially at high temperatures, those nitrites undergo further chemical transformation and convert into compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most thoroughly studied carcinogenic compounds in food science. They have been directly linked to stomach cancer, colorectal cancer, and esophageal cancer in multiple large-scale epidemiological studies. The European Food Safety Authority has issued specific warnings about reheating nitrate-rich vegetables, spinach, beets, celery, lettuce, for exactly this reason. And Taiwanese and Japanese food safety bodies have addressed this issue in their public guidance for years, recommending that cooked leafy greens be consumed immediately and never stored for reheating. What I see most commonly, and what concerns me most, is the meal prep pattern. People cook a large batch of spinach on Sunday, store it in the refrigerator, and reheat it in portions throughout the week. Every single reheating cycle increases the nitrosamine content of that spinach. The food that started as one of the healthiest choices you could make has been chemically transformed into something that carries a measurable cancer risk, through a process that is completely invisible and happens inside a microwave in 2 minutes. If you love spinach, and I want you to eat it because the nutritional benefits are real, eat it fresh in salads and smoothies, or eat it immediately after the first time it is cooked. Never store it cooked and reheat it. That single change eliminates the risk entirely. Food number 4, eggs. I told you this one would surprise you, and for most people, it does. Eggs are one of the most nutritionally complete foods that exist. High-quality protein, essential amino acids, healthy fats, vitamins. Eggs deserve their reputation as a near-perfect whole food. And in both Western nutritional science and East Asian food medicine, they are consistently recognized as foundational to a healthy diet. But here is what happens when you cook an egg and then reheat it. And this is the piece that most people have never heard. The proteins in eggs are extraordinarily sensitive to heat. When an egg is cooked for the first time, the proteins coagulate and set. When those already cooked proteins are then exposed to heat a second time, particularly at the high, uneven temperatures generated by a microwave, the proteins break down further, and in doing so, they produce compounds called oxidized cholesterol byproducts. This is the distinction that matters. The concern is not regular dietary cholesterol. Your body manages dietary cholesterol through well-established metabolic pathways. The concern is oxidized cholesterol, cholesterol that has been structurally altered by heat exposure. Research has shown that oxidized cholesterol compounds contribute to systemic inflammation, progressive arterial damage, and have been identified in studies as potentially promoting tumor growth under certain conditions. This is not a theoretical risk. It is a documented biochemical process. On top of that, Reheating eggs at high temperatures actively destroys many of the nutrients that make them worth eating in the first place. The beneficial compounds that justify including eggs in your diet are heat sensitive. The second round of heat degrades them significantly. You are taking on the chemical risk of reheating while simultaneously losing the nutritional benefit that was the reason for eating them. And then there is the food safety dimension. Eggs are a high-risk protein food in terms of bacterial contamination, specifically salmonella. If storage conditions were even marginally imperfect, you are combining a bacterial risk with the chemical changes of reheating into a single meal. That is a combination no food safety authority anywhere in the world would endorse. The solution is practical and not complicated. If you meal prep eggs or boil a batch for the week, eat them cold or at room temperature. A cold, hard-boiled egg carries none of the risks I just described. The protein is intact, the nutrients are preserved, and you have eliminated the reheating risk entirely. This is standard practice in Japanese convenience culture, where cold-boiled eggs are a completely normalized food format, not as a compromise, but as the preferred method. Before I close, I want to address something directly. I am aware that some of you are watching this and feeling a version of, everything is dangerous and I cannot eat anything safely. I hear that. And I want to be clear that is not the message. The message is that reheating triggers specific documented chemical changes in specific foods that carry real health consequences, and that those consequences are avoidable with practical adjustments that do not require you to change what you eat, only how you handle it after cooking. The common thread across all four of these foods is this. A second exposure to heat either creates harmful compounds that were not present after the first cooking, enhances bacterial toxins that survive the reheating process, or degrades the nutritional integrity of the food in ways that make the risk-benefit calculation very different from what most people assume. East Asian food safety culture has operated on this understanding for decades, not out of excessive caution, but because the food science supported it long before it became a mainstream conversation in Western nutritional medicine. The practical guidance is simple. Cook fresh whenever possible. When leftovers are necessary, understand which foods are safe to reheat once and which are better eaten cold. Store everything at the correct temperature and apply one rule consistently. Never reheat any food more than once. That single principle, which has been standard in Japanese and South Korean home cooking culture for generations, will significantly reduce your exposure to everything I have described today. If this video gave you information that you are going to use, please share it with someone you care about. Most people have no idea that these chemical processes are happening inside the foods they eat every day. That is exactly the gap this channel exists to close. Hit the like button if you learned something new. Subscribe if you have not already. I publish evidence-based content every week that bridges East Asian food science and Western clinical research in language you can actually apply. And leave a comment below telling me which of these four foods surprised you most. I read every single one. Dr. Jae Yoon, the science Asia has always known. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.